Welcome to In the News for April the 2nd, 2022, which is actually Saturday, April the 2nd. And we are looking at news stories, Jeff, that you put down for Friday, April 1st, 2022. By the way,
that makes it a little bit
Bernie.
confusing.
Yeah, I know. It's a little crazy, but it's good. By the way, I am Brett Bernie from AbsentLaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. I like this recording on a Saturday. It's a little more casual.
I know.
I've got a t-shirt on. I'm wearing my t-shirt for the Mac Power Users podcast. I don't know if you can see that on my little Mac Power Users logo.
I love how that comes together.
It's nice to record the podcast and then not have to go straight to work afterwards. Actually, you know where I'm going right after this, Brett? I'm going to an Apple store because my daughter's iPhone, the screen cracked. And so, but I got Apple Care on it when we gave it to her a year and a half ago. So fortunately, it's only like $30 to fix. So I've actually never fixed a cracked screen before, but I understand that it may even be just something that can do while we wait. But anyway, so this is my Saturday activity.
You know what?
So
if there's a place where you need to wait, an Apple store is just
not a bad one. I can check out the new studio and the new studio display. So where are you right now, Brett? You're in a hotel room.
I just have to tell you, it's funny. I took my kids out for breakfast, I think last Saturday, actually. And there's an Apple store right across from the restaurant. And Jeff, it had been a couple of years, I think, since we had just gone in. I mean, even when they were little, I used to take them in because it's the best. It's the best place to go. That they're in a secure location, but they love playing with the iPads, and I love playing with all the other toys. It was so fun to just go back into the Apple store. And, people are milling around. Anyway, you'll have a good time today.
Yeah. Back when my kids were younger and yours too, they used to have those like a circle, those sphere seats that the kids would sit on.
That's
and
right.
They would play with the iMacs, and they've really changed the Apple Store since then. But that used to be fun.
That's right. Okay. So thanks for the intro. Quickly, I am actually in Knoxville, Tennessee today. So I'm about 8 hours away from my home in Cleveland, Ohio. But we are here. I was presenting to the Knoxville Bar Association yesterday. And so that's why we are recording this on the Saturday, April 2nd, based on your stories from Friday, April 1st, because you are dedicated to putting out your In the News post. And boy, we got some great stuff. Let's start off as we are wont to do many times, Jeff. You pointed this out. iOS 15.4 was just released, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, somewhere along those lines. Well, just this past week, 15.4.1 was released, and you put that right at the top of your In the News post, and for good reasons, Jeff.
Yeah, it's a 0-day exploit is the short version of it. A 0-day exploit means that, it is already in the wild and there's evidence that people are using it. So, statistically, the chance of you encountering it is probably small, but this is not something theoretical that some researcher is like, oh, you could do such and such. This is actually being used. And I didn't even link to it, Brett, but I saw after my post went up yesterday, there was an article in Ars Technica that said that this is the 5th 0-day exploit that Apple has had to fix this year. And last year they fixed 12 in all of 2021. So, I guess we're sort of on track since we're now in April, maybe a little ahead of things. But the good news is when Apple learns about these things, they very quickly see how can we fix this? And then let's get the update out there. So, but then the burden is on us, right? We need to be the ones to update our iPhones, our iPads, our Macs, and everything else. And hopefully it's fine. But, there's why roll the dice, go ahead and install the update and get yourself protected.
And it's not very large. It's kind of small. You had
this was a pretty quick one for me.
Yeah, good. I actually haven't done it yet. I just haven't had time, but I will do that right after this. It is both for the iPhone, iOS 15.4.1, and of course the iPad is iPadOS 15.4.1. And then I think there is a Mac update.
There's a Mac, there's an Apple Watch. There's if you're wearing an Apple t-shirt, if it has an update, anything that you can update, go ahead and update it.
Anything with Apple. You had a good article from Macworld by Jason Cross talking about it fixes. I think on the practical side, it fixes some iPhone battery drain issues. But then what you have been talking about is a critical security flaw. I think he said in here, I loved it. The two phrases you never want to see in a security bulletin are executive arbitrary code with kernel privileges, and as you said, may have been actively exploited.
Yeah.
Those are things that this is something you need to go and take 10 to 15 minutes and make sure that all of your Apple t-shirts are upgraded to the latest. Okay, very good. That's our public service announcement. Another quick story that I thought was great. I saw this earlier, I think this week. One of our favorite apps for multiple reasons, Overcast, which is a podcast app. We like it because we've been using it for years and years and years. We also like it because we can see from some of our podcast download statistics that the Overcast app happens to be the one that most of you, thank you, all of our listeners, are using to listen to your podcast. So if you are using the Overcast app, then we recommend go and get the upgrade for this. You linked to a great story from the developer himself, Marco Arment. He talks about the Overcast redesign, and then another great review that you linked to, Jeff, from Mac Stories about John Voorhees, where he really goes into a lot of detail about all of the upgrades here.
Yeah. And for those listeners that don't use the Overcast app, I mean, just a really quick plug. It's a really nice, it's been a fantastic app for listening to podcasts for a long time. And one of the things that it has included, which have been fantastic, is the ability to speed up a podcast, which most podcast players have. But in addition to speed up the tempo, it can reduce the space between words. So I just paused between each of the words. But if you were using Overcast, and if you had that,
done, my friend.
If you had that feature turned on, and so you can actually get through a podcast more quickly. And if you're like me, I have tons of podcasts that I listen to. Frankly, I don't have enough time every week to listen to all the podcasts that I subscribe to. But I like being able to speed them up. And so when I'm listening in my car, I can get even more content. So that's always been great. With the new update to the Overcast app, there are some new features. I mean, there are things like pinning podcasts to the top of the screen and marking things red. There are some new features, but what I really like about it is the fresh new interface, so that when you open it up on the main screen at the very top, you see these buttons, like you can see now with different types of podcasts in them. And you can, some of them are smart playlists, like your most recent ones, or all of them that you starred. There's a nice playlist for podcasts, and you can choose whether you display or not display these. There's a nice one for episodes that you have started listening to but not finished, and that's a nice one, because I will often, I'll be listening to the new episodes as they come out, but sometimes there are podcasts that are evergreen, because maybe like it's about a movie that I watched or something, and you may forget that you started that podcast and you really wanted to listen to the end of it. It just, you never got back to it, and so you can look at that. And it's got a nice new interface. And he says this is part one of the new interface, that it's the interface for like individual episodes is coming in the future. But I like it. I mean, instead of having, you can see the pictures, how it looks, but the podcast art looks more distinct. It actually also looks nicer in CarPlay in my car. So it's a nice, it's a nice refresh to what was already, I think, the best podcast app. So this is fun stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll have the links here to the reviews if you wanted to look more. But by the way, it's a free app.
It's a free app. You can pay to remove. You can pay to remove ads, and maybe there's one or two other features. Like, for example, I think one of the paid features is that if you ever encounter audio that's not in a podcast, there's a way that you can send it to this app to listen to. And it's been a while, Brett, but there were times in the past where I might get an audio of like a CLE for alert attorneys to listen to, or something like that. And rather than just like listen to it in a web browser where you can't really go anywhere else, I would just send it into the Overcast app, and that way I can treat it like it was a podcast. So and I think that's a feature you need to pay for, but it's not very much the cost. But again, you don't have to pay anything. You can use it for free too. So
I want to say, okay, good. And
$10 a year.
Voorhees, $10 a year. It's a free app. And this update is free. It comes with the free app. And then if you wanted to remove the banner ads and like you said, just a couple of other small things, it's $10 a year. Marco Arment has been a very long, well-respected member of the Mac and iOS developer team. So that's just great to see. And thank you for doing that update on that. So another week, another story about trackers. Although this was a really interesting story, by the way, thank you for the gift subscription link in here, as you were very nice to do sometimes with stories from the Washington Post and other places, Jeff. But this was an interesting kind of a take on it, or at least just a little bit of a different twist. Why don't you explain it for us, Jeff?
Yeah, so Geoffrey Fowler, who's the lead technology reporter for the Washington Post, he said, let's take a look at, he was one of the first people when the AirTags came out to really write articles about the privacy implications of could people use them for stalking. And so he's coming back to revisit it a year later, and he tried 3 different products. He tried Apple's AirTag, he tried the Tile, and he tried
Right.
Samsung. They have smart tags, and
Okay.
he
That's the
had them
third one.
all
Okay.
set up through somebody else's iPhone. And then while he was moving around his baby stroller, just going around through the parks and stuff like that, he put all three of them in there. And his question was, would I know if I was being stalked? And for the Tile, he never got a notification. For Samsung, he never got a notification. For Apple, he did, although it wasn't until he came home. And although he said it would have been nicer to get the notification sooner, the problem is that, you know, you don't want the notification right away. If somebody borrows your keys to go run and get something, you don't want them 5 seconds later to be saying, oh, you're being stalked or whatever, because that's not what's going on. So, but what has changed is when the AirTags first came out, it would take maybe like 2 days before an AirTag would try to alert somebody, hey, I've been following your location for the last 2 days and I'm not associated with your iPhone. But nowadays it can be, you know, much, much shorter. I mean, if the time it took him to go take a walk and come back to his house, I'm guessing what, like 30 minutes or something like that. So that's much slower or much faster rather. For the other products like Tile and Samsung, in order to find out that you're being tracked, you need to actually launch a special app from them that you download and then just say, hey, can you check and see if something's been with me? And it'll let you know. But gosh, that's a really awkward way to do it. And, you know, the reality is that most people will never, ever do that. So he gives some thumbs up to Apple because at least it has a solution that is, you know, a little bit more proactive if you have an iPhone. Now, again, if you have an Android, then you're not going to get the automatic alerts. Although Apple does have a special thing. You know, it's such a tough thing. You want the AirTags to be useful for tracking your items, but then you don't want them to be used for stalking. And it's a back and forth. And you know, I love, Apple has tried hard to find the happy medium. And I think Jeff's article shows that they probably have found the right happy medium, although he does wish that there could be, you know, maybe even more ways to provide notice. Like, for example, he has an idea of what if all the product manufacturers used a common system so that, you know, everybody could talk to each other. But, you know, the problem there, Brett, is if somebody was going to really try to be nefarious, they would just buy something from Amazon that wasn't part of, you know, whatever the norm is. So there's so many ways to do this for bad guys to do it intentionally. That I think you got to give, you know, the people credit that are trying to, people, Apple and other companies that try to find a way to find the balance.
Right. I thought this article was so well balanced. I thought he did a good job. You know, it's obviously he likes this technology. He wants it to work, but his job is to at least raise the questions about it, things that I think other people were talking about. Plus, because of his position at the Washington Post, he does a good job of trying to reach out to all of these companies and ask them this. I thought this was a great paragraph here. Digital stalking is an expression of humanity's worst impulses, but is a problem of the tech industry's own creation. I thought that was good. That's a good way to put it. Tech fixes won't really work until the industry starts working together. Something, as he says, alluding to what you said, there is a glimmer of hope. It might happen, but you know, I feel like we've been down this road other times where, you know, every company has their own way of doing things, and for various reasons, you know, money, financial reasons, marketing reasons, all kinds of stuff. And I understand that, but yeah, you and I said it before. If somebody really wants to track somebody, they're going to find a way to do it, and there's not going to be really anything that's going to be able to stop them. But I think it's great, and like you said, I think this story does a good job. And he even, I think, gives a nod to Apple, at least in a little bit of a sense that they are aware of this. They're listening. I think he even said that Apple is doing a better job of opening up and listening to both sides of these arguments, as opposed to, you know, just going forward with what they think is going to work the best. And I think that's what he means by the glimmer of hope there. But it's good. I know we've talked about this many times, but I think it's important that we do have these discussions about it, just because it's going to help to find what that ultimate solution is going to be. And if nothing else, it's just being aware of it more than anything else.
One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is that some of the news coverage of this, I think, has been unfairly alarmist. But at the same time,
exactly.
In this article, by the way, this Washington Post article, I think is much more fair. But I'm still glad that they're out there, because it's two parts. I mean, you want companies like Apple and hopefully Tile and the others doing the right thing, but you also just want more public awareness so that people know about it, so that, you know, the person on the street, you know, the mom or dad that's not into computer technology and they don't read all the tech columns and stuff. I want it to be enough in the common knowledge that they have a sense of it, so that, if for some reason somebody is trying to use it maliciously against them, it's not something that they've never heard of before. So it's good to have some public awareness on this stuff.
Happy birthday to the iPad. 12 years old, almost a teenager now. This was a lovely little story that you linked to here, because it just had me walking down memory lane. The first iPad reviews were literally about 12 years. I remember Steve Jobs announced the iPad in January of 2010, because I still use a picture of him for the first time. He's sitting down in that leather chair on the stage. You remember that, Jeff?
Very much.
And I just remember it was a huge screen behind him, and he's sitting down because, Steve didn't use a lot of props, or Mr. Jobs, not like I knew him personally, but he didn't use a lot of props on the stage very much, except there would sometimes I know be like a podium where they would have a computer if they were talking about that. But in this case, that he sat down in a leather chair just to kind of show how intimate it is to be able to have the iPad in your lap. And he showed it, you could see the screen of this iPad on the screen behind him. And that's something that I will always remember, just because it was so unique. And this was about a year and a half maybe before he ultimately passed away. So he was definitely battling his illnesses at the time that he was announcing the iPad. In fact, I think it says in the story here, this was his final new product that he came out with before he passed. But this was a neat little article you linked to here.
It is, yeah. Many people have heard the story that Apple actually started working on an iPad first. And then as they were developing their first tablet, they're like, well, it's going to take a little while to get that on the market, but we think we could make a smartphone with some of the same touch technology. And so that's why the iPhone came out first in 2007. But then by 2010, they were ready to release the iPad. And I remember when the iPad came out, I was really curious about it. I didn't get one right away. I waited until a little bit later in the year to finally get one. But it wasn't long after I started using it that I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. But then when you look at the screen of the pictures of what you're showing for folks watching the video right now of the original iPad, and we've come so far from what it is today with the Apple Pencil and the speed and the apps that are designed for the iPad and everything else. But the iPad is it's a major part. For me personally, the iPad is a more important part of my life than the Mac is, and it's really on par with the iPhone. But whether the iPad is as important a part of your life as it is for me, or it's just something you use from time to time, it's been a fantastic product. And 12 years, I tell you.
It continues to amaze me, Jeff, just the little places where I see the iPad sneaking in. And it's not like it's a big deal. To be honest with you, even my pastor at a church, at our church, like I see that's what he uses for his notes. And even for accessing his books or the Bible or whatever, scripture that he's looking for. I see it sneak in there. Yesterday when I was at this conference, I see attorneys that they were asking specific questions about, taking notes like you and I have talked about many times. Or frankly, one of the other sessions that I was talking about was trial presentation. And I was giving people the different options. In the old days, you had to have a Windows computer, with a lot of equipment to use very high-end presentation applications on a computer. And to a T, just every single lawyer that I talked with, Jeff, they're like, oh yeah, the iPad. I don't use it. Even a professional trial presentation consultant I was talking with yesterday, she was like, oh, we don't use, it's all iPad now. Like we don't use anything else. And it was just neat. There's so many more examples where I see it coming in, but like the iPad just kind of sneaks in so many places from an education standpoint, from a creative standpoint. And now 12 years later, we can look back and see where we have come from. And I don't know, I just get more and more excited about even where it's going to go from here. Yeah. Good stuff on there. Well, from iPads to all kinds of good stuff today on the Apple TV Plus. I don't even know where to start on this. You had so many great links on Apple TV Plus, and we're talking about more about the service. I always feel like I have to make sure everybody understands this. Apple TV by itself, Apple TV nothing is the box. Apple TV Plus is the streaming service. Is that accurate to say, Jeff?
And then you have the TV, or maybe it's called Apple TV app on your iPhone or your iPad.
Right.
It all gets confusing, yes. But the streaming service.
All right, where do you want to start on this?
Yeah,
you
I guess the way to start. Stuff. a good place to start is the fact that they, got the Oscar for Best Picture, which was something that was very important to Apple last Sunday for Coda. Which, I mean, people are like, oh, well, Apple didn't actually come up with the idea for Coda. They saw it at Sundance and decided to pay a record amount to buy it. That's true. But what Apple also did is they spent a ton of money on promoting it and make sure it was getting out there. In fact, as we speak, it's now playing at a bunch of theaters around the country again. Apple has really promoted it. And so, and then it wasn't just the Best Picture, it was also the Best Supporting Actor and the other awards that they got, which are fantastic. But I think that this is great for the future because and I talked about this in a post earlier this week. Apple wants so much of enjoying content now is streaming the content. And if Apple was not in this in the world, because it didn't have to be in this world, then we would just have Netflix and Amazon and other stuff. And there would be Apple would, if it didn't have a dog in this hunt, there would be no guarantee that this stuff works as well as it does for the iPhone and the iPad and the Apple TV box and everything else. But Apple decided long ago that it's got the money, it wants to be a player in this world so that it can help to shape the future of it. And they've taken an approach much like the old HBO of let's not have quantity, but just quality, just have good stuff. We're going to have Sopranos, and we're going to have this and that. And so when, I laughed this week that when Apple TV Plus started in 2019, they had like 4 shows. I mean, there was nothing there. It was free at the time. But now I can't even keep up with all of the new shows. I was watching last night a show called Severance, which is fantastic. If you haven't watched it, it's just so good. Okay. And it's been, every episode has been getting better. It's fantastic. And then there was a new one that started yesterday that I haven't watched yet, but I'm going to watch later on today called Slow Horses. But the point is, if you look at what they have coming, like every Friday, there is a new show. So far this year has been a brand new show, not a new episode, like a new show or a new movie. And that's continuing out as far as I can tell until June, maybe all year long. They are really ramping it up with content. And as they win things like Oscars and Emmys and stuff like that, they will attract more artists, developers, people that are producing movies, actors, everything else, because people will realize that Apple is a big player in this market and that they're going to put their money behind good quality stuff. So, for those of us who are users, it's great because first of all, it means we get to watch some good shows that may otherwise not exist. And second of all, it means that we know that the shows are going to work great on our products. And as when Apple TV shows work great on our iPad and iPhone, it encourages, the Netflixes of the world and the others to follow, even though even today their interfaces are not as good. So it's for everything reason, it's great that Apple's gotten in the game. And since Apple is there, they might as well do well. And the Oscar shows that they can do well. But it's really
two things real quick. I think I saw, if I'm not correct, the original Coda, like you talked about, was French in origin, or it was a French film of some kind, right?
Yeah, there was a French film.
I saw the French president even tweeted out, like, congratulations to Coda winning, but this was originally a French. I mean, when you've got presidents tweeted out like that, like that's incredible. Go ahead, Jeff.
It was a French movie, but the French version of it, one of the things that it got some flack about is that it did not use deaf actors to play the deaf roles. So that movie was then adopted and they changed the plot a little bit. But the people who produced the original French version, they were also some of the producers here. So it was a French, French producers were in charge of this indie film, so to speak. And then the person that actually wrote the screenplay for the Coda version of the movie, that also got an Oscar for that translation and adaptation, whatever the right word is. And then Troy Kotzer, who was just so good as the father in the movie. Brett, every time we have the podcast, have you watched Coda yet? Have you had a chance to watch Coda?
Yeah.
Okay. You're going too soon. But now when you watch it, you can tell your family it's an Academy Award winning movie. It's so good. You need to watch it. It's great.
I think it's the next thing, because even the fact that this story that you linked to here from Troy, is it Kotsur?
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
I saw just a little bit of his speech, which of course, he's hand signing because he's deaf. But this story that you linked to here, this little,
his background, really interesting.
It's amazing. Like it saved his career. It said, anyway, this was a great story you linked to in Variety, and I'll have a link to it, of course.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading. He's fascinating. he's fascinating as an actor. One of the reasons he's so good in Coda is that, yes, he uses sign language, but he's so incredibly emotive with the sign language that even someone like me who doesn't read sign language, it just comes across, which of course is the sign of a great actor. The sign of a great actor, if even if they're not deaf, is that they can't, it's not just that they say the lines, it's that they really use their emotion so that you really believe them and you get into it. And that is what he does in this movie. In fact, somewhere else in Variety, I don't know if it's linked in here, they had him redeliver famous lines from famous movies, like from The Godfather and The Graduate and Star Wars, and just he was doing them in sign, but just the way that he acts it is, I don't know where the link to that is. We'll have to find it, but I watched that last night and laughed out loud watching it. So Coda is a real feel-good story. But again, for me, the big story here, it's not just the success of Coda, which is fantastic, but it's what this means for the future of the Apple TV Plus streaming service, because I just think the sky is the limit and we're going to get lots of great content. And that's just fantastic.
Not to mention, one other story that you linked to here was the fact that Jason Snell was talking about, again, the Friday Night Baseball is going to start up with about a week or so.
Yeah, this Friday
on Apple TV. Yeah. Just incredible, the stuff that just keeps coming out on this. All right, so another story. We've talked about 5G last week quite a bit on this, right? But you had a really interesting link today from somebody that's not just using 5G on their phone, like when they're out and about, but could I use 5G as a replacement for my home Wi-Fi network? I don't know if we're quite there yet, but this was a great story in tidbits.
Yeah, for years, I would go to conferences and I would see people who would have like a little cellular modem box that they would use to provide Wi-Fi to themselves. And they would connect their laptop to this little, device that you got through Verizon or AT&T, one of the companies. But now, this is the new thing, is that if 5G gets fast enough, you can actually, you don't need to have cable internet at your house or optical, internet, whatever it is. You don't need to have a wire at all. You could just get a little wireless box that would be fast enough to give you internet, and then you could, have a Wi-Fi so that to spread that throughout your house. So I still feel like this is early days, although this article describes that it depending upon where you live in the country, it can actually work. And I do think that this is, we talked last week about, 5G, is it worth it or not? Because, for a lot of people, you don't really get better speeds than LTE 4G. But I still think that there is a promise for 5G of coming in the future. And as it improves and as hardware like this gets even better, I mean, we could well be in a day, I don't know how many years from now, 5 years from now, maybe, where a substantial number of people are using wireless, just cellular wireless for their home internet. It's really interesting.
I've done this before, not necessarily by choice, but like when we're out in the country a little bit, so sometimes we lose power for a few hours at a time. But I still got to do podcasts and get access to email, and I will switch my iPhone to make sure it's on 5G, right? And so then I use my iPhone as a hotspot so that I can get access to it on my computer. And I got to be honest with you, I don't see too much of a difference unless maybe I'm trying to like stream some YouTube or something like that. But for the most, everything that I really need to get done from a work standpoint, it's great. And I think what you're referring to, I used to carry around a little, they call them Jetpack from Verizon or MiFis from AT&T. And that was my little hotspot. And it was almost like that became my router, as it were, when I was traveling. I don't do it so much anymore because I got my iPhone and it, and I'm able to get unlimited data on that. But anyway, I just thought I definitely see something like this happening, like you said, in the next few years. But and I think that the who is this Julio here in Tidbits was just saying it's not quite there, but I like the fact that he was testing it out and kind of gave us some pros and cons on that. That's good.
Yeah, we're getting close. This is the future.
Your last little feel good story here, I thought was just great. I had no idea, and I just say, bring it on. How wonderful is this? This is Aaron Stephenson, is a developer. And he just announced, a couple of days ago, his brand new app, which he calls it the Braille Scanner app.
Yeah, scroll
Jeff,
down
you want to
a little bit. You
describe
can
this?
see.
It's just
Yeah,
beautiful.
I've
There it
never
is.
heard
There
of
it
an
is.
app like
Okay, go
this.
ahead.
If somebody, we were talking about people who are deaf with Coda, and now somebody who is blind, can of course use Braille, and you can find books and stuff like that that are in Braille. But for somebody who doesn't know how to read Braille, if you have a need to see it, because maybe you're going to read it out loud to somebody else, what do? Well, now with his app, you have a solution. You basically take a picture of the Braille, and then it translates the Braille. It can just copy the Braille, so you can use it just for that purpose. As if you wanted to copy it and paste it somewhere else, much like you would for pasting actual text. But it can then translate the Braille into text so that somebody who doesn't know how to read Braille could do it. It's I believe it's a free app. This is a developer from down in Sydney, Australia.
Yes.
And I just never heard of an app like that.
Right.
What a great idea. So I don't encounter Braille very often in my life.
How wonderful.
But if you ever do, why not download the app? Just something else to have in your tool chest. And you never know. I mean, heck, as an attorney, one day I may well be working with the witness that, we use Braille to communicate or something like that. And so nice to have this little tool in your tool chest.
It just continues to amaze me how people can just develop something that's just so beautiful. I mean, I'm still even amazed still when I use my iPhone to scan a paper printed document, and it can OCR it, right? It can create editable text out of that. I like the fact that now we have the phones that can do, what does Apple call it? If I take a picture of like a sign and it can live text, right? Isn't that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So now we have that capability on this. And to me, I know that from an accessibility standpoint, the iPhone can read what the screen shows for folks that, may need it if they can't see it. And I know this is a little bit of a flip around with like scanning Braille and having it to create editable text, but it's just so fantastic that something like this is out there. So thank you, Aaron Stephenson, for thinking of this. He even calls it his passion project. Like it was literally something that he knew he just wanted to do. And man, hats off to him.
In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, Brett, but people who are blind, the first time that I ever saw a blind person use an iPhone, I was totally amazed because, and for me, the whole point of the iPhone is the big screen, right? And I'm like, well, how can you use that? Because it doesn't have Braille on it, but they have ways through the haptic feedback and stuff like that of moving around. And one of my law partners, her son is blind and uses an iPhone, and there's incredible things you can do with moving your finger around and just sort of feeling the screen and stuff like that. And Apple has, to its credit, has always been at the forefront of things like this, of making its devices accessible. So it's just a fascinating world that most of us don't. Much like before I saw Coda, I wasn't really thinking about the deaf community and deaf actors and stuff like that. And something like this, blind, people using iPhones wasn't at the front of my. But then it reminds you that there's for a big community, a big part of our population, this is important, and how fantastic that the iPhone is right there to help them. I love it.
I'll have to see if I can find it. I remember several years ago, David Pogue, I think he must have been at Yahoo. This was after he left, the New York Times or something, but he did this video interview it was a lawyer in New York City, and he uses the iPhone for everything. Like that's how he navigated, anything that he needed. And it was just like, kind of like what you're saying, Jeff. It was amazing to me how quickly he could navigate around to different apps. If he needed to call a taxi, if he needed to call some help, like it blew me away. And like you said, this is a small number of folks probably that need some of these features. But again, I'm just so always thankful that Apple, they obviously put a lot of resources into the accessibility components of what they do. And it's just wonderful to see that.
Yeah. And as we've discussed before, lots of time, I would just say, Brett, many times when Apple spends money on accessibility features for people who are blind or deaf or whatever, they will end up trickling throughout and become useful for all of us. That happens over and over and over again. So
absolutely. We all benefit from it, which is a great thing. So in the know, we talked about the Overcast app, and it is my app of choice when I am listening to podcasts for all the things that you already said, Jeff. But we also know from our listener statistics, thank you again, everyone, that while Overcast may be the number one podcast app that people will use, the second most used is the built-in podcast app from Apple. There's been there for a long time, Jeff, but in iOS 15, when they released it, they did give a couple of updates to the built-in Apple podcast app. And frankly, I didn't even know these were here, Jeff, because I'm always using Overcast, right? But just a couple of quick things I'll point out here. When I did open the podcast app, because I knew there were some additions that they had put into the to the app, two things that I liked right off the bat, and I think Marco has incorporated some of this into the Overcast app, but I like the way that the Apple Podcast app puts this front and center. They have two sections that are for recommendations. One is called "You Might Like," and the other section is "If You Like." On the "You Might Like," it says right here, it recommends some channels that may be of interest to you based on other channels that you follow and listen to. So these are mostly for the channels. So they say here, if you typically follow channels around health, then this section, the "You Might Like" section, will show you new and undiscovered health-related channels. The other section is called "If You Like," and the "If You Like" feature singles out shows that you follow. So these are individual shows, and recommend similar shows based on what other listeners are enjoying, along with other podcasts produced by the same studio. So it's going to be different, obviously, for you, depending on what shows you've listened to. And frankly, I did have a couple of podcasts that I started listening to in the podcast app, Jeff. So it bubbled up some pretty interesting recommendations for me. But I don't know if you've never used the Apple Podcast. Maybe you can tell me. I don't know, Jeff, if you have any. It may not have any recommendations. I don't know. But I just like to throw that out. To me, the Overcast app is something I've been using for so many years, and I love it, and I'm thrilled and happy to pay for it. But if you are one that is just wants to use sort of the built-in apps, the Apple Podcast app in iOS 15, which is also on the iPad and the iPhone, and the Mac, by the way, it's a great app as well.
Yeah, that's a cool feature. I don't use podcast app very often, but I use it enough that as I'm looking at mine right now, of my "You Might Like" suggestions, there's all sorts of tech podcasts, some of which I actually listen to, and some of them I actually am familiar with, but have not listened to. So even for me not feeding much data into there, it's got some good suggestions for me. I mean, for me, it's, and I see things like the t-shirt I'm wearing right now, Mac Power Users, the talk show, Accidental Tech Podcast, App Stories from the Mac Stories folks, the Upgrade podcast, which I listen to religiously every week. So if I actually had all of my podcasts in here, the suggestions would be even better. I didn't know that was there. Thank you for sharing that. That's a good.
Well, and I like that it's on the front page too, Jeff. Right? Yeah. I know that on Overcast, if you go in and you hit the plus symbol and you want to add podcasts, that there are some other recommendations that will bubble up there. But I like the layout on the Apple Podcast for exactly the things you were just talking about there.
Good tip. So my tip for In the Know, let me start by giving credit where credit is due. So I saw this on the 9 to 5 Mac website. Oh, yeah. Michael Potak posted it, and he saw it. He linked it from someone on Twitter, Michael Tobin, or it may have actually been, I forget if it originally was Twitter or TikTok. But so that's where it came from. But here is the tip. So you have two devices that are logged in to your Apple ID account, like an iPhone, an iPad, a Mac, any of those. And if you have something on one, you can copy it and then you can paste it on the other. I've known that for a while, but what I didn't know is that you could use even gestures for it. And so let's say, for example, on your iPhone, let's say you're looking in the Photos app on the iPhone and you have a picture there. I've known, although I don't use it very often, that you can do a pinch gesture with 4 fingers. So, start with your fingers out and pinch in. And at the very top of the screen for about a second, it will actually have the word copy up there to indicate that you have, it's like you've grabbed the picture, you've pinched it. Yes. And then you can go right over to like your iPad. And if you're in a place on the iPad where you could paste, like for example, I use GoodNotes for taking notes. I can just reverse pinch with the 4 fingers and it will paste it. And so it's a super fast way to take a picture and you just grab it from here and you paste it over there. And it happens so quickly, it's almost like magic. I'm like, are you serious? That actually works? And it's certainly not necessary because, for example, if I'm using my Photos app on my iPhone, because my iPad has the same Photos app and the same pictures on it, I could leave the app that I'm in. Let's say maybe I'm in the Notes app. I could leave the Notes app, go to the Photos app, copy the picture, go back to the Notes app or go back to the GoodNotes app or wherever app I want, and then paste it. I can do that, but it's so much nicer to just leave the app on the iPad that I'm using open and then use my iPhone sort of as a second screen just to scroll through my pictures and say, where's the picture I want? Okay, this is it right here. Let me grab it. Let me paste it. And it's done. It's so fast. Now, my only issue with it is that the gesture that you use for grabbing and for pasting, I'm not perfect with that. I need to practice to get better on it, because sometimes I do it quickly and sometimes I'm not as good. I'm usually better with the copy than the paste. But if you get used to it, and if you're often like, putting photos back and forth, I just didn't even know I could do this tip. And then once I saw it, I'm like, get out of town. This is fast.
I'm glad you brought that up, because here's what I want to make sure, because it says here, you're saying 4 fingers, Jeff, but I think they're talking about 3 fingers, because the reason I'm asking is because I will sometimes use the gesture where I pinch. Well, I do all 5 fingers, but I think it's like 4 fingers.
Yeah, you're right. It's 3 fingers.
On my iPad, it will bring me back to the home screen, right? So I'm just saying, and I don't think it'll do that on the iPhone, but on the iPad, a 4-finger pinch will bring you to the home screen. So it's 3 fingers. I usually use my thumb and my 4-finger and my middle finger, right? So I use that as my 3-finger, and then that works. That's incredible.
Yeah, like, I mean, so like I'm looking at a picture right here. 3 fingers. I just grabbed it, pinch, just paste. Now it just happened. It just happened. It's so fast. Oh,
I love this little video, and I'll link to this so everybody can watch this video too. And it's a little funny the way he does it here, but that's incredible. That's magic. How can it do that so quickly with the gestures there? That's brilliant. You've made my day. I'm so happy that you brought that up.
Who knows where Michael Tobin saw it originally, but I give him credit for spreading a little happiness.
Well, just watching his little video, he's like, "How can this can't work? It can't work," and then he does it again. Yeah. That's brilliant. I love it. Okay, great. I'll have a link to this so everybody can see the magic that we are amazed with on this. But oh man, I mean, how cool is that? Okay, great. I'm going to go and copy pictures back and forth all day long now. Jeff, thank you as always. That is a great, great tip. Wonderful talking with you, my friend. I got to get on the road to get back home, so we'll talk to you next week.
Have a safe trip back home. Bye-bye, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.